The public is conditioned to watch the skies for missiles. This is a profound and intentional misreading of the strategic landscape. The kinetic cost of a direct conflict, as outlined in reports from CSIS and RUSI, is prohibitive. The question is not whether a state like Russia is ready for a conventional war with NATO. The data indicates the question itself is a diversion. The first vector of a modern systemic attack is not a launch. It is silence. A coordinated subsurface severing of the fiber optic cables that carry 99% of global data, over $10 trillion in daily financial transactions. The goal is not battlefield victory, it is to trigger a global solvency crisis by attacking the system's digital arteries. This protocol creates a blind Leviathan, a superpower with unparalleled military force rendered completely inert, an aircraft carrier without orders, a trading floor without data, a government without liquidity. Its strength, its total reliance on digital markets and instant communication, is transformed into its primary liability. A system already weakened by national debt cannot withstand this type of systemic shock. For adversaries facing their own crises, turning the fragility of the West into strategic opportunity is not theory, it is doctrine. By attacking the liability side of the balance sheet, a weaker power achieves a victory impossible through kinetic means. The threat isn't that they are ready for our war, it's that we have made our entire economy the battlefield for theirs. The analysis of modern state-level conflict begins with a single, non-negotiable axiom. Protracted conventional warfare is a luxury reserved for nations with impeccable balance sheets. For all others, it is a fast track to systemic collapse. The motive for escalation is not ideology. It is insolvency. The battlefield is merely an external theater for resolving an internal solvency crisis. A state burdened by immense domestic liabilities cannot sustain a high kinetic cost. According to analysis from CSIS, an unpopular war transforms from a geopolitical tool into a catastrophic domestic liability. Every tank lost, every soldier deployed represents a direct withdrawal from a national account already deep in the red. This creates a mathematical pressure cooker. The state's leadership is not fighting a foreign army. They are fighting against their own economic event horizon. Examine the Russian Federation. Reports from outlets like The Times question its readiness for a sustained, conventional conflict with a peer competitor bloc like NATO. This perceived weakness is not a bug. It is the central feature of the strategy. Facing a domestic solvency crisis, the Kremlin cannot afford a symmetrical attritional war. The cost structure is prohibitive. This forces a pivot. It is a calculated, necessary shift from a contest of industrial output to a contest of financial pain tolerance. This weakness is the accelerant for asymmetric escalation. When you cannot win a war of attrition, you are incentivized to attack the adversary's foundational vulnerabilities directly. You bypass the army and target the treasury. You do not destroy their tanks, you destroy the credit-worthiness that finances those tanks. This is the protocol of the insolvent state. Transform your conventional military weakness into asymmetric financial leverage. The war is no longer about territory. It is about triggering a solvency event in your adversary before one triggers in you. The entire calculus of conventional warfare has been rendered obsolete by a simple receipt. Analysts at the Royal United Services Institute, or RUSI, place the kinetic cost of a modern main battle tank at approximately $5 million. The cost to neutralize that asset with an FPV drone is $500. This is not a rounding error. It is an economic kill switch. The ratio is 10,000 to 1. This inversion of force economics is the central accelerant in the new era of conflict. The prohibitive cost of symmetrical warfare is no longer a deterrent. This phenomenon is clinically referred to as the democratization of violence. It is the systemic collapse of the financial barrier to entry for projecting lethal force. A state actor facing a terminal solvency crisis, unable to fund a single tank battalion, can now acquire a swarm of asymmetric denial weapons for a fraction of the cost. They are not incentivized to engage in a conventional contest. They are mathematically guaranteed to lose. Instead, this protocol allows them to bypass the battlefield entirely and directly target the adversary's critical economic liabilities, transforming their own financial weakness into a credible and terrifying vector of attack. The primary battlefield is not a trench line in Europe or a strait in the Pacific. It is an abstraction. a network of jurisdictions deliberately engineered for non-attribution. We are told to watch for tanks and jets. This is a fatal miscalculation. The initial salvos of the next systemic conflict are being fired from gray zones, nations whose internal instability provides the perfect cover for staging financial attacks. These are not random acts of chaos. They are calculated probes. Consider the data points. Source number 2 confirms the U.S. national debt is a systemic vulnerability, killing the American dream. This is the target. Concurrently, a state like Russia evaluates the immense kinetic cost of a conventional war with NATO. Source number 3. The logical alternative is not peace, but asymmetric warfare. The operating protocol is to turn crisis into opportunity. Source number 4. A severe energy crisis in Cuba, driven by Venezuelan oil shortages, source number 1, is not viewed as a humanitarian issue by an adversary. It is seen as a proxy laboratory. A desperate, energy-starved state is a low-cost, deniable platform from which to launch financial vectors against an adversary's primary liability, its sovereign debt. RUSI and CSIS analysis indicates this blueprint is now active. States with acute internal fragility, often flagged in diplomatic travel warnings for places like South Africa or even Canada, become ideal staging grounds. An adversary can sponsor a cyber attack on a treasury auction or a synthetic liquidity crisis, then attribute it to non-state actors operating from within the chaotic gray zone. Plausible deniability is the primary shield. The ultimate leverage is kinetic. The sponsoring state, often nuclear-armed, provides a backstop. They don't launch the financial attack directly. They protect the proxy that does. Any attempt to retaliate against the gray zone staging ground risks a launch-on warning response from the sponsor. This protocol transforms the U.S. balance sheet from an economic ledger into a direct vector for nuclear risk. The math doesn't lie. The launch-on warning protocol is not a relic of the Cold War. It is a mathematical function of a solvency crisis. The doctrine dictates that if a nation's early warning systems detect an incoming nuclear strike, it must launch its own missiles before the initial attack lands. There is no time to confirm. This is the accepted, active protocol. Now, introduce a systemic vulnerability. The national debt, which economists have confirmed is a direct threat to American solvency, limits the capacity for a prolonged conventional conflict. A nation that cannot afford to absorb a first strike becomes entirely dependent on its deterrent not failing. This creates a zero-sum dependency on flawless information. This is the fog of digital war. An adversary does not need to launch a kinetic strike. A sophisticated cyber attack can blind the early warning radar, spoofing the system to show thousands of incoming missiles. In that moment, the commander is presented with a choice based on corrupted data. Does he wait for confirmation and risk total annihilation, or does he follow protocol and launch based on a digital ghost? Analysts at RUSI and CSIS have modeled this vector. The cyber attack forces a decision under manufactured duress. It weaponizes our own protocol against us. When a state's balance sheet is fragile, it cannot afford the kinetic cost of a conventional war, as reports from The Times on adversary readiness underscore. This incentivizes a hair-trigger posture, turning a cyber attack from a technical problem into a direct accelerant for nuclear escalation. The math is irrefutable. The calibration event will not be a missile launch. It will be a logistical blackout. Within 12 months, expect a multi-day cascading shutdown of a critical U.S. maritime port, Houston or Los Angeles. The official report will cite a catastrophic SCADA system failure or a novel malware variant. It will be classified as a non-state cybercrime. It will be neither. This is a solvency probe. The objective is not to sink ships. It is to test the fragility of the supply chain that underwrites U.S. national debt, which Fortune confirms is a terminal economic condition. According to RUSI analysts, a state actor unable to compete conventionally, as noted by The Times regarding Russia, is mathematically incentivized to pursue asymmetric vectors. This event serves as a low-cost, high-impact test of an adversary's ability to manipulate U.S. inflation and economic stability remotely. The blackout is a signal. It demonstrates the capability to turn the American balance sheet into a direct hostage. The kinetic threat is no longer about territorial invasion. It is the launch on warning posture to protect the gains achieved through economic attack. This protocol makes the U.S. Treasury bond a primary variable in nuclear escalation calculus. The calibration shot is to measure our response time not in minutes, but in fiscal quarters.